documents are a massive hoard of documents, and they don't contradict each other. They're all of a single mindset. They're all on the same wavelength. They're just more and more and more and more of the same thing. So studying the Dead Sea Scrolls is one of the most exciting studies you can do, and yet somehow the scholarly group that was put in charge of editing them from the 50s to the 80s turned them into the most boring thing one can imagine having ever encountered. So there was really a intercept there. There was something wrong there, and we felt we had to blow that open and start all over again.
I must say it is a very fascinating realm of study. Another very important scroll was the Copper Scroll. Could you enlighten us on that?
The Copper Scroll. Hey, Kevin, Mr. Fitzpatrick, you are hitting all the tough nuts here. I mean, you want me to tell you the Copper Scroll again on one foot. Copper Scroll. Copper Scroll was found in the third cave found, what we call Cave 3. DeVoe's people did find the Copper Scroll before Cave 4 was found. So let's say the Copper Scroll was probably found in 1952, and in Cave 3, you see the first cave, Cave 1, where the documents were found about a mile or a kilometer away from where the settlement was, up in the higher limestone cliffs of the Dead Sea area. There they were found in scroll jars, beautiful jars that had been prepared, and they were stuffed into jars, and they were very well preserved. So the documents from Cave 1, which were around 12 documents in all, ultimately ended up going into a museum in Israel called the Shrine of the Book, because the Israeli government purchased them in 2 loads. One from the original Bedouin in 1948 who were hawking them on the streets, and 2, another hoard that had been purchased by a Syriac metropolitan and taken after the partition of Palestine to Hoboken, New Jersey, where he had a little church, and he had smuggled them out in a tin trunk. Perhaps one of the best books to discuss that kind of activity is this Dead Sea Scroll Deception by Michael Bajan and Richard Lee, the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the epitome of what we now talk about as the Da Vinci Code. In any case, this prelate had brought them to Hoboken, put an ad in 1952 in the I think Wall Street Journal, scrolls for sale. The Israeli government saw that through third parties under a cloak of secrecy, bought those other scrolls. All those scrolls from Cave 1 are now in what's called the Shrine of the Book next to the Israeli Parliament in West Jerusalem. So that's 48 Cave. Then we had this period of inactivity for a couple of years. Then DeVoe took over the process, and he started things going, and he was interested in archaeology. So he started his surveys going in 52, 4 years later. Nothing was done in the meantime. And then he started finding other caves, Cave 2, Cave 3, Cave 4, Cave 5, up to Cave 11 by 1956. And the Copper Scroll was one of the first scrolls found in Cave 3. Now, Cave 3 was not far from Cave 1, and the Copper Scroll was there lying on the ground, just lying on the ground on the surface of the cave, 2 rolled copper pieces. Well, of course, anyone who would see 2 scrolls in copper would be like out of their minds. What is on these? Well, they juggled them around for a while. They didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know how to open them. But some clever scholars could read through. They were chiseled on the copper with a punching chisel. And you could see through from the backside what was written on them, and some clever scholars could see that what we had here was a treasure list. Well, that was just like too much for scholars to comprehend at that time, and there was a lot of secrecy and a lot of concern because the question was raised among the what we now call the consensus scholars, the people who control the editing and interpretation of the scrolls, the academic elite, headed by Father DeVoe of the École and later Frank Moore Cross at Harvard and his entourage of people in the United States, one of the American scholars that was on the original team. They were the ones that propounded, along with another churchman called Father Millick, the Essene theory. And the question was raised, well, why would the Essenes, who were supposed to be retiring, contemplative, against riches, against the things of this world, and so on, why would they be interested in treasure? And so that was a huge consternation there. And finally, an individual called John Allegro took the copper scrolls to the University of Manchester, where he was connected, and a metallurgist there cut them open, and sure enough, it was a list of treasure. What kind of treasure? It was clearly the temple treasure. And it was the hiding places of the temple treasure. Well, who would have hidden the temple treasure? The Essenes would have hidden the temple treasure. This created all sorts of problems for the official theory. And that's why John Allegro was ultimately thrown off the scroll committee, because he wanted to publish this material in 1956 when he discovered its contents. Father DeVoe forbade him to publish until his assistant, Father Milik, a Polish Hebraicist who's still living, had a chance to research this and make the official publication. I don't think this happened until around 1966 or so, 10 years later. And Father Milik's presentation mostly tried to present this as well, I guess you'd call it a child's exercise book or something imaginary, not a real treasure list. But I think most of us who've studied it since think it is a real treasure list, and the explanation is pretty simple. Some scholars, like I think Father Milik, try to say, well, maybe it was deposited there by someone who wasn't a member of the community, a passerby or something. But I think the explanation is pretty simple. In the Jewish war against Rome from 66 to 70, and this is why your listeners and those people who do this field have to know so much data, because otherwise these things are meaningless, and they have to follow the scholars like sort of lapdogs or lemmings, because they can't make their own determinations without all this data. This is why I wrote this big book, 1,000 pages long, to try to give the public at large the data it needed to come to grips with this material itself, because often the academic elites have access to grind or agendas. In any case, in the war from 66 to 70, when the temple fell and Masada fell, and we know that Qumran was probably finally taken by the Romans, a group called the Zealots had control of the situation from around 66 or 68, certainly to 70. They had control of the temple, certainly from 68 to 70. And they would have had control of the temple treasure. And this list says that there are three copies, two hidden in other places. This is executed very, very quickly. And we know that the Zealots probably hid the temple treasure. They say, well, how come we can't find it? Well, Allegro went around later on trying to find these hiding places, looking for a residue of these hiding places. But again, Josephus, the Jewish historian of the time, solves this problem for you. He was a Jewish historian of the first century, witnessed the events in question, went over to the Roman side, that's how he saved his skin, was adopted into the Roman imperial family, that's why his name is Flavius Josephus. The Flavians were the new family following the Roman general in Palestine who replaced Nero by the acclamation of his troops in Palestine. Josephus was part and parcel of that, and he wrote the history of the exploits of this family under the book title called The Jewish War. And in that book, he says that the Romans took the treasure of the temple, tortured him, till he revealed the hiding places of the temple treasure. So we know the Romans weren't playing games. They were out for as much wealth as they could get. And a lot of people say that the temple treasure built the Colosseum for the Roman imperial family, the Flavians. I think there's a lot of truth to that. But in any case, they found the hiding places. So there's no treasure left. But this map or this list makes it clear that the group that we have responsible for the scrolls and inhabiting those caves, if they're all the same group, and I think they are, had something to do with the war against Rome from 66 to 70. So finally, the conclusion that I draw from all that, which is a lot but very small in terms of what you have to master for this, I would say that this is the literature of the Messianic movement in Palestine, not the Essenes. Insofar as these are Essenes, they're Essenes-like described in this literature. This is finally the literature of the war against Rome. This is the literature that propelled the war against Rome to take place from 66 to 70 and to retake place 50 years later under a later Messianic leader called Son of the Star, Bar Kokhba, 132 to 136, what we call the Second Jewish Revolt in Palestine. That's what Bajan and Lee picked up from me, and that's why they called their second book The Messianic Legacy, because they understood that this was the literature of the Messianic movement from a Palestinian viewpoint, not a Pauline viewpoint.
Now, the main thesis of your book, James, a Brother